All right. I used to know how to play my own theme song, but I apparently have forgotten. I got to try one more time. Close enough. Of course, I could just do the short version. There we go. Well, welcome everybody. This is the monthly live stream with At Home with Music. It's a beautiful spring day out there. Let's see if I can show you how beautiful it is outside. Let's see there. You might be able to see just looking out there on the back deck. I'm here in my beautiful little studio in Asheville, North Carolina, just enjoying a beautiful spring day. I'm going to get outside later on, but right now I am here live with you. I wanted to talk today about a life in music. Now, over the course of the videos that I've done here in the last couple of years, I've talked about different aspects of my life as a musician. But I thought what I would do here is just kind of give you a 30,000-foot view of everything that I've done as a musician, or what my career has been like, if you like. And we have to go all the way back to 1969 when I began taking piano lessons. Now, there's a video where my dad tells the story about how I got started in taking piano lessons.
Worked on that thing, Leon, for months.
So you can hear my dad in the background there.
Your mom said, "That's rosewood." It was beautiful, and I cleaned it all up, and I burned it.
When I post this video when it finally goes live on YouTube, when the replay is up, I'll stick a link in there to that particular video. And you can hear my dad, who was 93 at the time, maybe 94 actually, telling the story of how I got started playing music, how I got started taking piano lessons. And I'll tell you, I hope that my memory is as good as his when I'm 94 years old. So a lot of good genes there in the old Geen family, I guess. But he tells the story in great detail. And so I started taking piano lessons in 1969. I was just 11, actually. Yeah, I was 11, almost 12 years old. In 1970, I turned 12. And within 6 months of taking my first piano lesson, I was giving a solo piano recital. And I was playing little pieces like... I don't even remember who the composer was, but that's just a little bit of something that I was playing at age 12 after 6 months of lessons. I even fancied myself a composer. And so I wrote a little piece that went like this. It wasn't very good, but maybe not bad for a 12-year-old. And I was Theme and Variations, Opus 1. So that's what I did in 1970. And that was around the time that I discovered, and I've talked about this in a previous video, I discovered that I had perfect pitch. I had no idea that every musician didn't have perfect pitch. And I also studied with a couple of different teachers. I studied with one fellow who was helping me develop my technique. And I studied with another teacher who was showing me a little bit about composing, because I wanted to be a composer. When I started junior high school in 1970, I decided to keep my ability as a piano player a secret, because it wasn't that cool to be a piano player when you're a 12-year-old boy. You want to be out there playing sports and impressing the girls. But the word got out, and I ended up accompanying the choir. Not only did I accompany the regular school choir, I accompanied the girls' glee choir. So here I am, 12-year-old boy in a room full of girls playing the piano for them. It was a little embarrassing, but after a while, it got to be kind of fun. When I reached high school, they wanted me to continue playing for the choirs down in the junior high school. They were right next to each other there in San Pedro, California. And so I would play for the high school choir, and then I'd walk down the street and I would play for the junior high school choir and for the junior high school girls' glee club. And so I was also at that time playing for the church choir. So I was playing for 4 different choirs. So I learned a lot about being an accompanist at that time. And of course, right around that time, 1970, I started playing in church. And then eventually in 1972, I was hired as the church organist for some reason. People thought that if you played the piano, you could also play the organ, which is sort of true, but I never really learned to work those foot pedals. And I had to be very careful not where I put my feet, because sometimes during the sermon, if my foot would slip and hit one of the pedals, you'd hear, some kind of course, it didn't sound like that because that's a piano sound, but it was pretty embarrassing. Anyway, I wasn't really a good organist, and I'm still not very good. And so eventually they let me switch to piano. And that's where I learned to play practically every hymn ever written. I learned to play from a hymnal. And once again, I accompanied the church choir. I accompanied the youth choir. At the same time, I was accompanying 2 choirs at the junior high school, and I was accompanying the choir at high school. And I also accompanied the theater kids when they were doing their shows. And so I learned to play the scores to You're a Good Man, Charlie Brown. And I played the scores to South Pacific and West Side Story, The Sound of Music. We were pretty ambitious in those days. We actually did a show called Best of Broadway. And so I had big giant stack of books of all these Broadway show tunes. And I thought, man, I don't want to be lugging all these books around. And so I memorized all the scores and played everything from memory. I don't know if I could do that now. Anyway, once I finished high school, I, of course, went on to college. I went my first year at University of Southern California, USC. Naturally, I was a music major. I hadn't determined what my minor would be yet. So I went as a music major and discovered that college was actually easier than high school. It never occurred to me that you could put all your classes into 3 days and only go to school 3 days a week. So that's what I did. I went Monday, Wednesday, Friday. Sometimes I would just have one class on Tuesday and Thursday. So it just felt much easier than high school. But I really enjoyed my first year in college. I studied harpsichord for a year with a teacher named Malcolm Hamilton. And I never really stuck with the harpsichord because it's kind of hard to have a harpsichord in your house. But we did have a piano, so I continued studying piano. I was actually studying for my first year in college. I was still studying with my original piano teacher. And then when I went to my second year in college, I went to a different college, California State University, Dominguez Hills, just a little state university. Back in the days when state schools were relatively free, the only thing I paid for was my books. I never lived on campus. I always was a commuter. So I've never been part of a fraternity or anything like that. Anyway, continued studying. I eventually settled on music theory, and I was a religious studies minor. And I studied with a teacher in college. Her name was Rosemary Heiler. And I also continued my studies in music theory, counterpoint. I've talked about one of the teachers that had a tremendous effect on me, Mr. George Hoysenstam. And while I was in college, I worked as a busboy to help pay for my books and stuff. So I actually got a job on the Queen Mary, which at that time, and I guess it still is, I'm pretty sure, is permanently docked in Long Beach, California. And so I was working as a busboy at the Lady Hamilton Seafood Restaurant, kind of a, really nice, fancy place. And that was kind of a fun job. It was sort of a mindless job. I always remember bringing some water and different things to this one gentleman. He said, "Oh, you look like a fine young man. What are you doing working here?" So I'm working my way through college, sir. I said, "What's your major?" "Well, I'm a music major, music theory major." And he's decided to say, "Well, do you have perfect pitch?" I said, "Well, I think I do, yeah." And so he taps his spoon on the side of his glass and says, "What note is that?" Ding. I wasn't sure. It sounded like it was in the crack there between notes. I'm kind of taking a guess. I don't remember what I said to him, but I thought that was interesting that he must have had perfect pitch because he was trying to test me at that time. Anyway, in 1978, during my junior year in college, I actually worked hard and finished all my studies a little bit early so that I could go on tour with the Continental Singers. I auditioned for them. They were based in Thousand Oaks, California at the time, and it was basically an organization that gathered young musicians from all across the world. Most of us were from the United States, but just all kinds of young musicians, singers. A lot of them were singers. We had a horn section. We had a drummer. We had a bass player. We had a guitarist. And I auditioned to be a keyboardist. And so I made it. I passed the audition and I was assigned to one of the groups. There was like 10 or 11 different Continental Singers groups that toured all over the world. Now, the tour I was on, we would be visiting 38 of the 50 states and Bermuda. And that was interesting because I had, at this point, never left California. 20 years old, and I'd never left the state of California. And so finally got to tour all around the United States. We did 91 shows in 90 days. So it was pretty much a whirlwind tour. And we only stayed in a hotel one time. The rest of the time we'd pull into a town, we'd set up, we'd do the concert in a church or a community center. And this was like contemporary Christian gospel style music. And basically would be a choir, 20, 30 singers. We had the horn section. We had the drums, bass, guitar, keyboard. I played whatever piano was available because, electronic keyboards were basically in their infancy back in 1978. Anyway, after doing that, I also flew for the first time from the East Coast to Bermuda. And Bermuda was kind of an interesting place. Finished that tour, finished my college education. I graduated in 1980. Shortly after that, I began to try to find work as a musician. I was doing some studio session work at the time. I never really made it into the big time, but I was getting to play in some of the smaller studios. And it was at a recording studio on September 6, 1980 at 7 p.m. at a little studio in San Pedro, California, that I met my wife, Cheryl. As I've mentioned from time to time, my wife is also a musician, although she never pursued it as a career as I did, but excellent guitar player, very talented songwriter. And she was doing her first professional recording, and I was hired to play piano on it. And so that's when I met her. That's why we can pinpoint the exact place, date, and time that we met. I know there's a lot of couples that kind of gradually came to know one another and became aware of each other's existence, but we know exactly when we met. And so I played on her first recordings, and her producer said, "You guys need to perform live together." And by that time, I had learned to play stuff that was not classical music. When I was with the Continental Singers, that was the first time I had ever seen a chord chart or a lead sheet. And I had to learn how to just play chords, instead of reading notes. I was really good at reading notes, and I still do. I still can read music. But I had never played from a chord chart previous to 1978. Well, I learned quick, and that helped me when I was playing music with my then musical partner, later my fiance, and then later my wife. We met in September 1980 and got married in August 1981. The first job I had when we got married, I went back to the food service business. I had worked my way through college as a busboy and a room service waiter on the Queen Mary, and now I was a banquet waiter at the New Porter Resort. And that was not a bad job, actually. It was hard work, but it paid fairly well. It could be very demanding, but nevertheless, I wasn't really doing anything with my music until I got an offer to be a church pianist at a large Baptist church in Gardena, California. So I left my banquet waiter job and went into church music. Eventually, I became the minister of music. I was very young at the time. I was only 24, but I became the music minister at this Baptist church. And so that was my job until we both ended up in Florida. So during that time in California, from the time we got married in 1981 until 1984, for a while we attended Calvary Chapel, Costa Mesa, the big Calvary Chapel. You may have heard about that church if you've ever seen the movie The Jesus Revolution. Chuck Smith was the pastor at that time. And we got to know one of the associate pastors. His name was Malcolm Wild. He, of course, was also a musician. He eventually called us. He was called to pastor a church in Florida, and then he wanted to bring me on as his assistant pastor. And so I was happy to do that. I thought that was great, another step in my career. And Cheryl happened to be get an offer for a job at Harris Corporation in Florida. And so we moved to Florida in December of 1984. And I began as a Calvary Chapel pastor. Now, I had been in music ministry. I had went 1 year of Bible college after I got out of regular college with my degree in music theory. So I ended up serving at that church for 6 years, from 1984 to 1990. But I began to realize that I wasn't really cut out to be a pastor per se, but I was cut out to be a musician. And so I left that position in 1990 and became a freelance musician. And I acquired an agent by the name of Len Turner. God rest his soul. He was a British fellow who had started an agency called Len Turner Entertainments, based in Melbourne, Florida at the time. And he booked musical acts and so forth for the country clubs and yacht clubs, private parties, all up and down the coast of Florida. And so my first music job as a freelance musician, I was playing cocktail music at the Bent Pine Country Club. That's when I started to learn how to play jazz in standards and the Great American Songbook. And eventually, Len, who was also a very good musician and music arranger, had his own band, and he asked me to join his band. And so I got to play not only solo jobs, but I also got to play in Len's band. And that was a lovely experience. I mean, he took such good care of me. And throughout most of the 90s, all the way until 2002, I worked with him for 12 years. I never had to beat the streets to find places to play. He would send me a message, or he'd call me up and say, here's where we are. And I would write it down. So, okay, we're going to be at this club on Thursday night. We're playing a dinner dance on Friday. We're going to go over here on Saturday. It was great. And I never had to think about what to wear because we always wore tuxedos. So, man, I was in show business. And we played all kinds of different settings, yacht clubs, country clubs, private parties for the very wealthy people in Florida. I miss those people, though, because a lot of the folks we were playing for in the early 90s, these were people from the greatest generation, people in their 70s at that time that had been through World War II. There were a lot of World War II veterans, a lot of businessmen. These were classy folks. We were playing rumbas and cha-chas and merengues and waltzes, and they knew how to dance all of those different dances. Very elegant. They got all dressed up, and they were just very polite and nice and generous. I miss those times, actually, but I stuck with it until 2002. Now, at the same time, I built my recording studio. I had studied, believe it or not, in college, and I thought I'll never use this information, but I studied multi-track recording. We actually had a recording studio at Cal State University, Dominguez Hills. Very unusual thing to have in the 70s. Big 2-inch tape. I learned how to edit by cutting tape with a razor blade. Oh, that was nerve-wracking. I didn't like that. I learned how to mix and how to bust sound around the boards. It was I thought, I'll never use this, because when I was doing studio work, there was a sharp separation between the musicians and the engineers. That separation began to break down with the advent of computers helping you create music. And eventually I built a studio in 1990. I had a little, don't laugh, I had an Atari 1040 ST computer. I had to load the operating system on it from floppy disks every day before I began work. And then I had a little program that allowed me to program the keyboard. And then the computer would play the keyboard, and then it would sync up with the tape. I mean, it was crazy. I'll go into some explanation for that, but it's a lot of technical stuff that's kind of beyond the scope of At Home with Music by this time. But I began to get a reputation as a good arranger and a producer, and so I became a record producer as well as a gigging musician. I have a whole rack of CDs back in the days when people actually put out CDs, and I either play on them or I produce them, mix them, recorded, and so on. And I got to meet a lot of wonderful, talented artists. And one of the things I hope to do At Home with Music is to go back and reconnect with some of these people and see if they're still active with their music. I know some of them are. Some of them are very active, but they're under the radar. You know, they have a local following. They enjoy what they do. They're not nationally known or famous, and I did work with a few folks that did achieve some notoriety in their respective fields. I've worked with gospel singers, R&B singers, singer-songwriters, folk artists, rock and roll artists. I've recorded a few bands, but most of the time I was working with solo artists. And I even did some, believe it or not, near the end of my time in the studio world, I did some rap music. Some rap artists were coming in, and I was making beats. I don't know if I could do that anymore, but that whole business has changed, and that would be the subject for another full-length video. Anyway, I was doing those things at the same time. In 2002, I decided to concentrate more on the studio work, and so I ended my relationship with Len Turner. It was very amicable. We stayed close. I still did occasional gigs for him all the way up until the time that I came up here to Asheville. So I semi-retired from live performing at that time, from 2002 until 2005. And I concentrated on my studio work, and I also began to teach group piano lessons, like piano seminars. I'd have maybe 20, 30 people in a room, and I'd show them how to play chords, how to play melodies. And a lot of what I taught in those seminars is now present in some of the videos on my channel. Of course, I've been able to really expand on that now because I have more than just 2.5 hours to teach everything. But that was fun. A lot of folks were really starting their music education again. A lot of adults in the class. I even had a few children who were just getting started. And I was teaching what I call the popular method. It was chord-based, learning chords, learning popular songs, learning how to play hymns and so on. I didn't teach classical, although I could. If anybody if any of you are interested in studying classical piano, I can still teach you how to do that. But now I specialize in teaching the popular method so that you can play any song that you want to play in any key, by the way. So can you continue doing that? And then in 2005, I met a young lady named Sybil Gage. Now, if you're watching this, Sybil, I'm going to embarrass you because I have been one very fortunate musician because I worked with an agent for 12 years, never had to work hard to find places to play, and really enjoyed those times. He was quite a gentleman. I also got to know his wife, Jan, who was the lead singer in the band. Excellent singer, great show person, if you like. She really knew how to connect with an audience, as did Len. It was a tremendous, and also worked with a fabulous drummer named Jim Lynch, who also used to work in Vegas. So I had it made. I mean, it was a tremendous time. So it was hard to leave, but I wanted to concentrate more on the studio work. I was working with a lot of different artists at the time, around 2002. And that continued till 2005 when I met Sybil. She was doing a solo concert at a place called Cocoa Village. Don't remember the name of the actual venue we were in, but very charismatic play. She also wrote some of her own songs, but she could sing all different kinds of styles of music. She would sing R&B, standards, Narlands, jazz, and eventually her pianist was beginning to have health problems. And so she said, well, I understand that you play. Would you, can you help me out? And I thought, well, okay, I'll do it. I mean, I'm going to have to learn a whole new style of music now because all I could play at the time were standards and soft jazz. And I wasn't really a Norlands, Dr. John, Professor Longhair style piano player. I had to learn a whole new genre of music. But I thought, hey, this is a challenge. And I shouldn't be backing away from a challenge. I mean, why not expand my musical palette, as it were? Why not learn a new style? I was in my 50s at the time, or was I in my 40s? 2000. I was getting up there. I think I was almost 50 years old, but nevertheless, so why not learn a new style? Several new styles, because she did everything. And I played for her from 2005. I think that was in our first gig together. And all the way up until the time that I came up here to Asheville. So, wow, a whole new world. We were playing in different types of places. We played in dive bars, but we also played in private parties. We also played in some really, we even did a few country club type things, but it was not really nice background music for dancing type of thing that I was used to doing. These were shows. Sybil was an entertainer. And so when we got out there, people were watching, people were listening. And boy, you really had to be on your toes at that point. There was no just sitting back and kind of daydreaming and playing, we were up there. We were on the spotlight. Not that the spotlight was on me. It was always on her. But she also put the spotlight on me a lot because in a lot of the songs, she would just give me a verse to play. And I had to learn how to carry the music. And it wasn't just background. I was part of the show now. And so this was show business. And I wasn't wearing a tuxedo anymore. I was wearing a suit. I put on a fedora and tried to look cool. I don't know if I ever succeeded in looking cool, but nobody ran from the room screaming, so I guess I can't complain. But this was a whole different world now. This was show business. And she had charisma, still does. She's still busy. You can look her up, SybilGage.com. You can find her video. You can still find some of the videos with me in them on YouTube. And maybe I'll put a couple of links that if I can find some of them, where I'm playing boogie woogie, and I'm playing Narlands jazz, and we're playing R&B, and what fun that was, to see the audience react. She really knew how to connect with the audience, and she also had this uncanny ability to know what song to do next. She'd have a set list. We used to joke about it. I'd get the set list from her in the email beforehand. It's okay, we're going to be doing all these songs. I'll be ready. And we'd get up there to start the show. Sometimes it was we had a band. Sometimes it was just the two of us. And I really enjoyed those shows because those were freewheeling. And she'd get about 3 or 4 songs into the set list and then throw it away, because the audience seemed to just tell her what to do next, and she would do it. And it was always the right song. There was never a case of, oh, why is she doing that song? That doesn't fit in here right now. But she always knew exactly what song to do, and I could always tell what song she was getting ready to do by her between song pattern. Got to the point where we could practically read each other's minds, and she'd start talking and I go, okay, she's going to be doing that song. And I'd start kind of playing underneath her. And then eventually she'd launch into it and I'd just follow her right into the song. What great fun that was, And so we did that. And once again, I never had to go find the work. Her husband was her manager, and a very good manager he was. He found us all kinds of different places to play. Some really cool spots up and down the coast of Florida. We even did a show in New York in an off-Broadway theater. We went over to New Orleans and played there. We did a show in South Carolina, all over the place, either as part of sometimes she'd bring the whole band, sometimes just the two of us. A lot of great memories there. And we just ended up having a great time. Now, around 2016, my wife, who at this point had been working as the COO of a Silicon Valley company, and she was running the Florida office. This is a long story, but I'm going to tell it anyway. She got a job offer to come to Asheville, Florida to work for Aerospace. Good job offer. And we talked about it and decided, yeah, let's do it. We're going to move to Asheville. Now, we always loved Asheville. We used to come up here on vacation. We've been up here a few times on vacation because this is a beautiful place. Never thought we'd live here, but there you go. So she took the job and she came up here in the fall of 2016. Now, I was still obligated to play several more shows with Sybil. And of course, I had to break the news to her, and that was very difficult to do. But I knew that she was going to be okay. I'm sure a lot of musicians would jump at the chance to work with her. I was just the lucky one that got to work with her for 10 years. Anyway, 2016, Cheryl moved up here in the fall, and I stayed in Florida and lived with a good friend of mine. He let me stay with him he lived in Cocoa Beach, and then did the last several shows. And also at that time, I was still playing piano in our church at the time that we've been there for 17 years. That's a whole other story. Anyway, moved to Asheville. I came up here in January 2017. And the idea, we had a beautiful house, which we still are in. Right now, I'm here down in the studio. And then we live mainly on the main floor. And then the third floor, the upstairs, is the guest quarters. So the original idea was to have artists come here to Asheville, and it was like a bed and breakfast with my recording studio. And we had several artists lined up to come record up here. And I thought, this is great. I'll get back into my full-time job as a record producer. And then the pandemic came along in 2020 and killed the whole thing. That was the end of that. And so to make a long story short, that's right around the time that I started At Home with Music. Now, I've worn a lot of hats in my career as a musician. I've been a church musician. I've been a assistant pastor / church musician. I've been a gigging freelance musician. I've been a music arranger. I've also had some success as a composer and a songwriter and a recording engineer and a teacher. All teaching has been part of this the whole time. Kept wearing all these different hats. And now I'm wearing the hat of a content creator. And I think this is the last hat that I'm going to wear. This is basically, I believe, what I'm going to be doing pretty much from now on. I really have no plans to retire. This is not exactly ditch digging. And I really do love to teach. And I found that YouTube is a nice platform for me to do it. Still trying to get everything organized on the channel. I'm very grateful for so many folks who have subscribed. But you can tell, the story's kind of been disjointed. Obviously, I'm not reading from a script, but I've been blessed with so many people who have helped me in my career, that have had a big influence on me, that have enabled me to grow as a musician. I owe a lot to Len Turner. I owe a lot to Sybil Gage, and to the wonderful teachers that I had in college, and to the teachers that I started with. And I'd be interested to hear from you at some point. Who influenced you to get back into music? If you haven't played in a long time and you decided, I want to start again. I want to do more with my music. I took piano lessons when I was a kid, and I quit, and I wish I hadn't. And now I want to start again. Who influenced you to get back into it? I'd be interested to find out. If you've had music teachers that had a really great influence on you in the past, I'd love to hear about that. You can leave a comment when this video is posted on YouTube, or on any of my videos. You can ask questions and so on. Anyway, I've talked long enough. If you have any questions that you wanted to ask, now's the time. I'm just about ready to end this live stream. It looks like I've been talking for over half an hour, which is pretty unusual for me. But just wanted to give you a glimpse of my story as a musician. I think a lot of musicians would tell you, it's not like you get a job and you do one thing for 30 years and get a gold watch. You end up doing a whole bunch of different things. And that's how it is when you're making a career out of music. Now, I know a lot of you are never going to be famous musicians, or, you're not necessarily trying to make music your career. I wouldn't exactly suggest it anyway. It's a ups and downs. I've had some real ups and downs in my career. Fortunately, though, I'm surrounded by people who have really supported me, especially my long-suffering wife, who has supported me emotionally. Sometimes she's had to support me financially too, during those times when it's feast or famine in the music business. I've had some good feasting years, and unfortunately a few famine-y years. And right now I'm in the process of rebuilding with the YouTube channel, because it takes a long time. This is not a make a living quick type scheme here. Anyway, I can see I've got a few folks watching, and I appreciate you joining me today. We're going to do another one of these live streams on the last Saturday of the month of May, although I think I might be out of town. I'll let you know. I will always post on your Facebook and on the YouTube. On the YouTube. I sound like an old guy when I say it that way. On the YouTubes. And let you know when I'm going to be going live again. And I've got a lot of interesting things that I want to share with you, both on the live streams and in my upcoming videos. By the way, if there are any particular topics, music-related topics, that you'd like me to address here on At Home with Music, please be sure to let me know. You can contact me through my website, athomewithmusic.com. I'm also preparing my page on Patreon for those of you who feel led to help support this channel. That will help me to keep going, to improve the quality of my videos and the frequency of them, and basically just help keep the lights on. And somebody said, "Oh, thank you. It was a pleasant time listening to your journey." Well, thank you so much for listening. I know I probably missed a few things. I had so many things going on at the same time that it's hard to keep it straight. And Lord knows I do not have the greatest memory in the world. I remember practically every song I've ever learned how to play, but I can't remember what I had for breakfast this morning, even though I cooked it myself. Anyway, thank you all so much for joining me today. And I look forward to speaking to you in the next one. And we're going to say goodbye for now. Oh, let me see. I should play my theme song. There you go.